Honourable member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of the motion to redefine Canada's mission against ISIL. I'll be splitting my time with the honourable member from Surrey Newton. As Canadians, we must ask ourselves, what does victory over ISIL look like? When our brave soldiers return from their tours of duty, what will have come from their efforts? What will they remember? What will they have achieved? How are we to measure success? Will they see a land divided, still plagued by civil war, a people living amongst the ruins of their proud past? Or will our veterans look back and see a people who have rebuilt their homes and their lives? Mr. Speaker, let us not measure our success in Syria and Iraq by the number of airstrikes we see on TV, but instead by the circumstances in which we leave. Yes, the measure of success, of course, means defeat of ISIL, but just as important is the establishment of a civil society. By developing essential services that Canadians sometimes take for granted through the training of police and security forces, we can impart the tools necessary to maintain stability and peace, as well as providing the means for them to establish proper and effective government. By no means can we call our mission a success if the people of Iraq and Syria are forgotten. Left to fend for themselves in a notoriously unstable and unpredictable region, surrounded by nations that will wish to use this conflict to further their own political ends. Without ground assistance, the region will remain fractured, an incubator for violent extremism. If we are to do right by our serving men and women, do right by our coalition partners, and to do right by the millions of innocents caught in the crossfire, we must think long-term. At its roots, insurgency is a political problem. What we're calling for is an all-government approach that includes the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of National Defence, Ministry of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, and the Ministry of International Development to form a comprehensive plan. A wider range of agencies, elements, power, and capabilities, in addition to the military, must come together in unity of purpose to defeat ISIL. Defeating an insurgency requires more than just bombing. As it is, there are lots of bombers available in the region, as was so eloquently mentioned last week by our Minister of National Defence. Up until now, as we've discussed at length in the House, Canada has provided support for coalition forces through 6 fighter jets sent to the aid of the Coalition Air Force of 300 jets. Canada's pilots and ground crews have supported the mission by applying 2.5% of the overall coalition airstrikes, and they've performed their duties admirably. At a national level, we too have an obligation to look toward the next phase of this armed conflict. Not simply because we faced an expiration date on March 31st, and not simply because we received a new mandate from Canadians, but because the reality of the missions demanded it. The Minister of National Defence has answered many questions in the House regarding the consultations his ministry has been having with our coalition partners. As the campaign moves forward, our government is proposing to provide the support Canadians are known for, providing stability through visible presence to assist local police forces, assisting coalition forces by providing intelligence gathering and reconnaissance assets to enhance regional stability, training local forces, increasing humanitarian support and development assistance. Mr. Speaker, the opposition has been pressing and continues to press for details of the plan going forward. The consultative approach our government is taking to get things right has required appropriate time in order to develop a plan that Canadians can take great pride in. Our pilots and ground crews have honored their commitment to Canadians and to our coalition partners by delivering such crucial support for this war-torn region. In Afghanistan in 2010, the former government learned that a multinational coalition fighting against an insurgency had to adopt a new sophisticated approach becoming known as whole-of-government approach. This new approach had to examine the wide range of tools available among our allies, harnessing the individual strengths of the coalition members to get the job done. The former government decided to refocus all its efforts into training local forces, increasing humanitarian support, development assistance, and working very hard and quite successfully to enhance regional stability. It provided additional intelligence and reconnaissance assets and focused and refocused on training. This is exactly what we're proposing to do in Syria and Iraq. We're applying the lessons learned in Afghanistan. With respect to the military line of effort, we recognize that this is ultimately the people of Iraq and Syria who will be responsible for stabilizing their country. By working with them, we can help to bring a disciplined approach to the fight. We need to enable them to defeat ISIL, and we have the expertise to help bolster their capabilities and prepare them for that fight. Going forward, this is where we'll be focusing much of our effort, as we announced last week. We'll triple our commitment to the Train, Advise, and Assist mission in northern Iraq. At the same time, we're going to significantly increase our intelligence capabilities. There is a complex interplay of forces that underlies the conflict in Iraq and Syria. We need to have a clearer picture of how all the pieces fit together, and we need to better anticipate the impact of our actions. Our enhanced intelligence contribution will be invaluable in this regard. Solving a complex issue such as we're facing requires a thoughtful and equally complex approach which utilizes Canada's strengths to support the concerted international effort to root out ISIL. Canada needs to continuously work on the ground, providing intelligence and training to ensure that local forces have the resources they need to maintain a lasting peace. To that end, our government is committed, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with our coalition allies. This typically Canadian collaborative approach has earned Canada and its armed forces the respect of the international community. Upon their return, families and friends can welcome our soldiers back to Canada and congratulate them for a job well done. Canadians can take great pride in the role our serving men and women will play in the establishment of security and hopefully the reconstruction of the nations ravaged by ISIL forces. Canadians can also be proud of our military families at home supporting our forces overseas. And I know we're proud of the extraordinary generosity demonstrated by Canadians across the nation. They've stepped up to welcome families from Syria and have come to Canada in the hopes of starting a new life. Through these efforts, at home and abroad, Canadians have proved that we are ready to help however we can. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Comments? The honourable member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Guelph, who is almost my next-door neighbour, for his speech here in Parliament, and welcome him to the Parliament of Canada. It's a true honour to serve here. And I also want to acknowledge the great work that our men and women in uniform do for us every day in providing protection and security. Member said that we should be doing more than just bombing. And Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we totally agree with that. In fact, we've been doing much more than that for many years. He indicates that we should be providing increased essential services, providing increased training for police and security forces, and we agree with providing increased training and increasing our capability in terms of intelligence gathering. But I have yet to hear one of the members on the opposite side explain how pulling out our CF-18s out of the fight there, providing cover for our allies and for our own troops on the ground, how that actually improves our ability to restrain ISIS. I would like him to explain that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's great to hear from my next-door neighbor in Kitchener-Conestoga, a great member that's been here for many years. Our government is looking at the key strategic role that Canada can play, and we focus on where our strengths have been developed over the years in helping to provide assistance on the ground. Beginning of the mission, we helped in the air. We still have air coverage through our coalition partners and have developed a strategy with our coalition partners going forward into the new phase of operations where we can help to stabilize the region in other ways.
Questions and comments. L'honorable député de Trois-Rivières.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague from Guelph for his presentation that I listened to with great interest. I don't know, it's because of my flu or my slow brain, but whether it's the motion or his speech, I can't find an answer to a question that I've been asking since the beginning of our debate about this. Where can I find, in his speech or in the motion, anything that tells me that we're really attacking the basis of the problem, that is the funding of ISIS, the supply of weapons or foreign combatants? What is Canada doing to stop these three issues? The Honourable Member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member from Trois-Rivières for his question and hope he gets well soon. Having the flu when you're away from home is never a good thing, but it's great to see that he's persevering and being in the House with us today. So the question of what we do and the details we take from the House of Commons to the theatre and what we will do in terms of reducing the flow of arms and money is really, I think, a question left for the professionals in the theatre. We have military command and we have coalition forces that we're working with to have the best strategy going forward. Where Canada will be available is to be visible on the street, working with the local police forces and local security forces. We'll also be working, of course, with trying to develop trade in the region and build up their economic stability. It is a very complex issue. It's a complex problem, and there's no simple solution to it. And we are discussing that at length to see that even within the House that there are ideas being kicked around that we need to consider as we go forward.
Thank you. Nous avons le temps pour une très courte.
We have time for a very brief questions and comments.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since the beginning, my analysis of the motion is that there's a question about the mission and no answer. My assessment is that right now we're deploying troops, special forces to provide security and training, medical troops, and the last point is that we're supposed to welcome tens of thousands of refugees. That's never mentioned, but apparently we will. Is this mission becoming an evacuation mission? Instead of combat, we're replacing this by bringing in refugees. Is this what we're going to do?
Member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for his question and for his service to our country. We are increasing the number of troops on the ground to 850, so we're not pulling out of the mission. And it is an all-of-government approach, so we are working with refugees to help them settle into Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.